This is the story of how a 15-year-old unknowingly killed 75 people on board Aeroflot's flight from Moscow, Russia to Kai-Tak Airport in Hong Kong. On the 23rd of March 1994, Aeroflot Flight 593 took off from Sheremetyevo International Airport in Moscow to Kai-Tak Airport in Hong Kong. The flight was operated by an Airbus A310 flown by Aeroflot, and shortly after 12:45 a.m. in the morning, the aircraft crashed into the mountain range in Kemerovo Oblast, killing all 75 passengers on board. This is a reenaction of this flight on Flight Simulator. Now, shortly after midnight on 23rd of March 1994, the aircraft took off from the international airport in Moscow with 75 occupants on board, of whom 63 were passengers. On board was pilot Kudrinsky, who was taking his 2 children on their first international flight. Now, during the flight, they were brought into the cockpit whilst he was on duty, which started off a chain reaction. Of the 63 passengers on board, 40 were Russian nationals, including 30 airline employees and family members. The remaining 23 foreigners were mostly businessmen from Hong Kong and Taiwan who were looking for economic opportunities in Russia. The captain of Flight 593 was Andrei Viktorovich Danilov, aged 40, who was hired by Aeroflot in November 1992. He had over 9,500 hours of flight time, including 950 hours in the A310, of which 895 were as captain. Igor Vasilyevich Piskaryov, aged 33, was hired by Aeroflot in October 1993 and served as the first officer. He had 5,885 hours of flight time, including 440 hours in the A310. With the autopilot active, pilot Kudrinsky, against regulations, allowed his children to sit at the controls. His daughter Yana took the pilot's left front seat at 12:43. Kudrinsky adjusted the autopilot heading to give her the impression that she was turning the plane, though she actually had no control of the aircraft. Shortly after, at 12:51, Eldar, pilot's son, occupied the pilot's seat. Just under 4 minutes later, Eldar had applied enough force to the control column to contradict the autopilot for 30 seconds, causing the flight computer to switch the plane's ailerons to manual control whilst maintaining control over the other flight systems. Eldar was now in partial control of the aircraft. A silent indicator light came on to alert the pilots to this partial disengagement. However, despite the audible warning signs, they apparently failed to notice the silent indicator light. The son was the first to notice a problem when he observed that the plane was banking right. Shortly after, the flight path indicator changed to show the new flight path as the aircraft as it turned. The A380 had banked past a 45-degree angle to almost a 90-degree angle, steeper than the A310's design allowed. Now, as the A310 cannot turn this steeply whilst maintaining altitude, the aircraft started to descend quickly, which increased G-forces on the pilot and crew, which made regaining control of the aircraft extremely difficult. The autopilot, which no longer controlled the ailerons, used its other controls to compensate, pitching the nose up and increasing the thrust. As a result, the plane began to stall. The autopilot, unable to cope, disengaged completely. At the same time, the autopilot's display screen went blank. To recover from the stall, an automatic system lowered the nose and put the plane into a nosedive. The reduced G-forces enabled Kudrinsky to retake his seat. Piskaryov managed to pull out of the dive but overcorrected, putting the plane into an almost vertical ascent. This caused the plane to stall once again, causing it to enter a spin. During the spin, Kudryntski managed to almost recover the plane, but pulled back the yoke too aggressively, which caused their speed to drop. A rudder input then sent the plane to a second spin, this time a flat spin. Although both pilots managed to regain control again and level out the wings, they had no idea how far they had descended, and their altitude by then was too low to recover. 58 minutes after taking off, the plane crashed in a flat altitude at a high vertical speed. 16 minutes elapsed between Kudryntski's children first taking the pilot's seat and the aircraft crashing. All 75 occupants died on impact. The A310 crashed with its landing gear up, and all passengers had been prepared for an emergency as they were strapped into their seats. No distress calls were made before the crash. Despite the struggles of both pilots to save the aircraft, it was later concluded that if they had simply let go of the yoke after this first spin, aerodynamic principles would have caused the plane to return to level flight, thus preventing the crash. There was no evidence of a technical failure in the plane. The wreckage was located on a remote hillside in the Kuznetsk-Alutu mountain chain, about 12 miles east of the Kemerovo Oblast. The flight data recorders were found on the second day of searching. Families of Russian victims placed flowers on the crash site, while families of Chinese and Taiwanese victims scattered pieces of paper with messages written on them around the area. Now, in the aftermath of the accident, Aeroflot originally denied that children were present in the cockpit during the accident, but eventually accepted the fact when the Moscow-based magazine Obrozetvatel published a transcript of the cockpit voice recording on the week of 28 September 1994.